She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach for business leaders struggling to connect the dots between good intentions and tangible results. Prior to launching Social Edge, she was a DEI operations expert and ERG talent lead at Apple, and a business process and re-engineering specialist and digital transformation strategist. She received her BBA from the University of Cincinnati and an MBA from UNC's Keenan-Flagler Business School. Please welcome Yvonne Jackson.
Well, I will say, Jason, I am standing up here in shame because I'm that person who moved from Sunnyvale to North Carolina. I apologize. But hopefully after my presentation, you'll understand why I made that move. So what I'm going to do right now is just ask you, if you were to think of a few words to describe the culture of your company, your leadership style, what would you say? Would you say, hey, everyone gets along, it's inclusive, we're a family, all these really great adjectives and conversations? Or would you say these words? It's a bit toxic. People are resentful. People are just, it's not inclusive. I don't see anyone like me. If that's the tone that you're used to, I just want you to sit with those words for a few seconds. Now, what if you were able to bake into your business strategy diversity, equity, and inclusion in a way that made it part of the fabric, the DNA of your company? Wouldn't you want to do that? But the question is how? And I'm going to tell you how. It's through partnership. You see, there's this concept of cultural transformation theory, not cultural transformation theory. And it says that at one point, society lived in a partnership model. In this model, people pretty much did things so that everyone could survive, lived. It was based on compassion. It was based on respect. But society, the world, mankind, we don't stay in the same space. We continue to evolve. And what did we do? We evolved into a dominator model, one based on dominance, control, fear. In other words, if you make people afraid, they're going to work harder. That's the world that we live in right now. In this dominator model environment, decision-making is typically centralized. In fact, the power is typically held in the hands of a small, elite group of people, right? And because of that, there tends to be a lack of racial, gender equity, and honestly, everything's a power struggle. Why? Because someone has to be at the top and someone has to be at the bottom. That's the way the world goes around. And during this phase, however, the pandemic happened, right? And you know what? Those people who used to be the biggest workaholics, who were all about dominating, suddenly they're like, you know what? I want work-life balance. I want to see my kids. I want to go on vacation, right? There's a shift where people said, I don't want to work without being compensated for what I do and what I bring to the table. And because of that, those people in that little, that had that power in their hands, what did they do? They came up with such dismissive terms as nobody wants to work anymore, quiet quitting. But let me tell you, it's not that people don't want to work anymore. It's the fact that they don't want to work like this, okay? Instead, they want the values found in partnership. And if you look at this list, these are things I bet some of you want to see in your workplace right now. Shared decision-making, transparency, open communication, inclusion, equity, right? This is the world they want to live in. They want to feel psychological safety. I mean, I want to feel psychologically safe, right? And in companies that use this partnership model, what we find is that employees are asking for access to information because without access, they can't do their jobs correctly. And by getting access, they're expecting companies and businesses and leaders to be available for feedback. They're expecting people to hold themselves accountable nowadays. In fact, companies that do this well, they support the whole person. There's a survey by, I think it's Great Places to Work, that says that in companies that consistently provide support to their employees, they are 6 times more likely to be innovative, and they're 5 times more likely to want to create a career at that company. Talk about retention and retainment, which all of us say we can't get, right? Now, I would be remiss in this group not to talk about partnership and the concept of technology. Let's be clear, and I'm gonna read this from the slide. Technology reflects the values of the individuals who build them and the social structures in which they are made and used. Point blank. That means that in a dominator model environment, you know what happens? Technology ends up being used for not the good. Instead, it's used to create and perpetrate violence, oppression, racism. In fact, often it's used to actually contain the status quo. Like, we use technology to keep people in their place. Is that the environment, is that the workplace we want to work in? So I'm telling you, there are investors in this room, there are visionaries in this room, there are designers, builders. What type of workplace do you want? Do you want to build technology that helps people care, be creative, or you want to do things that perpetuate the cycle? Example of this, and it was mentioned a little bit, AI. It's been said that AI development is more like parenting a child than programming a robot. Why? Well, neuroscience says that when children are raised in environments that are filled with dominance, that are filled with fear, guess what? Their brains work differently. They're unable to recognize nuances. They're unable to understand and adapt to change. In fact, when they're faced with conflict, what do? They cannot think of nonviolent ways to deal with it. And isn't this the same criticism that AI and technology gets right now, what people are scared it's going to do in the future? So it really is our responsibility to raise AI, raise technology, build businesses that do not perpetrate oppression and inequity. And y'all all heard it. Y'all have seen Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. So I'm asking all of you here, what are you going to do with your power? So I'm going to leave you with these two ways to reshape your workplace. First of all, cultural transformation, and I'm actually saying those two words together on purpose, are a strategic priority. We have moved into a human-centric knowledge economy. There's no way about it. We're not going back to the past. Second of all, continue to move your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives forward. Well, let me tell you, I'm also a ChatGPT junkie, and I asked ChatGPT to create this wonderful, beautiful metaphor for the end of this talk. And it came up with something about gardens and flowers and stuff like that. But I'm not going to tell you that ending. What I'm going to tell you is that I'm not standing here in front of you because I want me to work in this environment. Honestly, for some of us, it's too late. We've already held and found out what the real world is about. But I know I have a 2-year-old daughter, right? I'm 43 with a 2-year-old daughter. So I have to stay alive forever, okay? And I need all of you to create this workplace for her. Create this workplace for the future. Because trust me, if you do, your business, your families, yourself, everything, technology will do even better than what we can expect.
Thank you. Wonderful. Questions for Yvonne? Right here.
How do you see that playing out in a large company where you kind of have to have hierarchy because of the size, but that kind of would tend towards dominance, the dominant model?
Well, there's pros and cons to each way. No model is exact, right? But in my time at Apple, what I found, and also having done strategy work, is that most companies, when they grow, they start off as a startup model, where everyone just has the same ability, the same say, that decision-making shared, but as they grow, they turn into more maybe that dominated model, centralized decision-making. But once you get to a certain size, that Apple size, that Microsoft size, all those departments turn into startups all over again, right? So it's about in those organizations, in those small areas, can you create transparency within your teams, right? Can you create open communication? It doesn't have to be this huge, broad, from the top mandate. It starts small in your group, right? And that's how I see things moving forward. This can be done in the smallest and the biggest companies.
There are questions. We'll go over here.
Hi, Yvonne. I'm curious, do DEI experts also include neurodiversity in workplace cultural transformation? Because I'll be honest, sometimes I will come across and they'll touch on the really important issues of gender, racial discrimination, other things that are more obvious. But I wonder if these are things that are still being explored. Tech seems to do pretty good at addressing that, like on the area of autism, Asperger's, ADHD. But I don't know about other areas. What are you finding?
Well, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. A lot of research, again, it didn't need to be done. And like I said, technology has kind of created this way that we keep the status quo, and no one wanted to do that because then they have to make change, right? So everyone's kept it quiet. But it's actually one of the reasons why I moved back to North Carolina. You know, I got my MBA here. I went out to the Bay. I lived that life. And I no longer was surrounded by thought leaders when it came to these type of topics. And when I learned that it's not just about diversity inclusion, but there's the psychology of it, there's the sociology of it, there is the mental health aspect of it. There's all these pieces, and my goal as part of my legacy is to actually do that research, right? See holistically how all these things impact. In fact, if I didn't have to use the word diversity, equity, inclusion because the algorithms are checking on it, I probably wouldn't, because there's more to it than just those things. It's a greater problem, and I'm hoping that we get to it.
Thank you so much. Wonderful information.